guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. I'm joined today by the legendary surfer Pat O'Connell. We're going to be talking about everything from growing up in California to the Momentum generation, getting on to the Endless Summer movie, as well as his time on the world tour, his career at Hurley, and of course his new role as the president of Florence Marina X. Hope you guys enjoy. Pat, how are you? How's everything going?
Yeah, I'm good. Waking up to a nice hot coffee and kind of gloomy morning here in Southern California, but there's been a lot of surf, so it's been nice.
Nice. And have you been getting in? You've been managing to get a couple of surfs before work and.
Yeah, and work is great. Our office is right across the street from the beach, so. Yeah, I've been doing lunch sessions, putting my wetsuit on in my office and running out and getting a quick wave. And yeah, and it's, again, for us here, Northern Hemisphere, it's like we're getting that extra couple hours in the evening, which is amazing. Last night, the waves, we've been getting a lot of South Swell already, but getting those final 2 hours before dark is great.
Pat, I guess I'd love to take it back to the beginning, if that's all right with you. So,
yeah.
So you, I guess, like, you're not from California originally. You actually grew up in Chicago, right?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting path I had. I think maybe partially why I think people think I'm so like upbeat and stoked. Well, I lived in the Midwest, and California was a dream, and for us to be having a conversation right now about warm water surfing and all these other things, these are just not things that people from Chicago typically talk about.
Yeah.
So my family, we moved when I was 12 to California. My dad owned a business, and part of his route and running his business was through the West Coast. And so he was spending a lot of time here, and he's like, it's, sunny and 75 degrees every day. What am I doing? Like, why am I flying back into snow and freezing and rain? And so he, pulled us up, and we moved to Orange County. So we lived in Newport Beach there for about a year. And then we moved down to Dana Point, where I've been since. Yeah. And so we've, I feel really lucky. I feel, and I love Chicago. It's just a really different life for, especially for a kid, the independence that I was able to get as a young kid, because, if you kind of go into the Midwest of America, it's a lot of bat and ball and sports. I played a lot of soccer, a lot of baseball, and they're team sort of environments. And what was so interesting when I moved to Chicago, or from Chicago, was this idea of just, I could do anything I want here in California, because I wasn't waiting for somebody to sort of go, hey, like playing baseball, there's not someone to throw the ball back at you. You're just throwing the ball away. For surfing, it was this thing where I could wake up at 5 a.m. and go surf on my own. I didn't need anybody to sort of take me. Although surfing is more fun with your friends, it was something I could do on my own, which was really interesting at such a young age. And I think that's one of the things that brought me into surfing, was that independence. And at that age, and certainly
how old were you when you moved over there?
Yeah, I was 12. And so by the time it took me about a year to kind of get going. So I was probably 12, 13.
And did your parents sort of look at that and they were like, they were then happy for you that you were so stoked, and you're like, all right, I just want to surf? Or were they sort of thinking, maybe, were they trying to like direct you in another sort of way and, focus on your studies, don't surf so much, like things like that?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Like, I think they were happy. But I also think, again, like coming from the Midwest, it's very conservative. My cousins, everybody was going to four-year college. And I think the surfing thing was great. I think my parents were happy. But it was, it was a big decision. Like, hey, I started to kind of progress at surfing, and is this actually a real job? Like, can you make a living from this? Is this a viable career path? And to be honest with you, like, I sort of look back and you don't know. I mean, we all sort of take a path in our lives that there's that passion and reality, that kind of that balance.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure if I was following one that was more passion based than reality. And I think I probably was, because I don't know, the industry was somewhat new. There wasn't, I mean, certainly I wasn't going to retire being a professional surfer. There wasn't that kind of money. But then that's kind of when it was sort of an interesting time. So I started to do these events and compete. And then,
when did you first start competing? When was that?
Probably when I was about 13. I, kind of a year in, was like, I'm super competitive person. So I was like, okay, I want to try this. And, not long after that,
that's quick.
So
I mean, sort of starting a year before and then kind of going.
Yeah, and I should define competing. At that age, there's it's one heat, because they can only scrap together 6 kids of that age group. So I'd surf one heat, and that was like considered competing. And basically it was just sort of getting to your feet. I think they would, clock the time that you stood up, and if you stood up for 10 seconds, it was a 10, something like that. Yeah, and so not long after that, because of where we lived, a lot of other kids from other places who were coming to compete, because Southern California was kind of the hot spot for all of like amateur surfing, whether it be the NSSA or the USA Championship, stuff like that. Everybody would come and stay through the summer. And so that's when, I met Kelly Slater and Ross Williams and Shane Dorian, Todd Chester, Brock Little, all of these guys. And so basically our house, my parents' house, became sort of ground zero in the summer, where, on any given day, there'd be 30 surfboards on the lawn and a bunch of kids, sticking stuff in the toaster and all sunburnt and, whatever. And so that became sort of a little bit of like home base. And that's kind of like the beginning for me of, sort of that momentum group and really having those roots. And so it happened pretty quick. And again, it's so much based around where we lived and the proximity to the beach. And again, that sort of independence to be able to go and do anything. Because look, for the beginning of, when I met, Kelly, Ross, Shane, we weren't 16. We were too young to drive. So we needed to be places that you could walk, because, we didn't have a driver's license yet. So it was a really good time.
And did you have any idea of, the guys that you were surfing with, and obviously you were pushing each other, but did you think that,
this was like a defining?
Exactly, that this was like, that this was the generation that would then change, like it would change surfing, it would change the sport?
So I certainly saw Kelly was something different, right? Like the first time I saw Kelly surf, it looked different, and still to this day, like it's just the way, like he's a genius in the ocean. And when he stands up on a wave or paddles for a wave, even at that level, like you just could tell. And Martin Potter, who was a world champ, or really high on the tour, whether he was world champ at that exact time, he used to stay close to my house and used to surf at the local beach, and Tom Carroll as well. And when those guys were around, and I would sort of do the yardstick, right? I'd sort of measure myself like, okay, where do I sit? And then I'd watch Kelly and we'd all surf together and I'd be like, holy shit, like Kelly's better. And he was 15. And I was like, it kind of, and it wasn't even any disrespect to those guys. In those little waves, Kelly was probably better. Those guys were, much older and probably better in better waves. But what I knew in my daily life was the little crappy beach break in front of my house. And I would watch Kelly, and I think that's the best surfer in the world. When the best surfer, Martin Potter, actually in the world showed up, I actually thought Kelly was as good as him. And I was like, wow. And it actually had a pretty profound effect on me, because that's when then I kind of started looking around at my friends and realized like, oh wow, like we're not just like, this is not just like a group of people that are really good because we're young and we're better than most people in the lineup every day. The very best surfer in the world is actually surfing at the beach. And I wasn't probably at that level, but Kelly certainly was. And I was like, okay, so if I can keep myself within eyes distance of Kelly, then I'm kind of in that same conversation. And that's kind of how I saw it. But yeah, like, and that kind of goes back to like this, we were talking about whether it's like reality versus passion. Mm-hmm. The passion was there. And then when I started to kind of like, I'm very analytical in the way I think. And so like I was saying, it's sort of building that yardstick. Like I was looking going, oh, okay, wow. Like, if Kelly is this, then I'm like sort of within range, and okay, that's all right too. And, I'd look at Shane, and well, Shane was always crazy. And Ross as well, like, but that group, that's kind of how it started, and was really, really important for, I think, all of our development, not just mine, but like, I think Kelly as well.
When did the US team become about? Like when did you get on that?
So I want to say we went to Japan in 1990, and that was for the World Junior Championships, which was a really big thing. I think it was only every couple years, and so it was a big deal. I was really excited to make the squad. We had there were some great surfers that, like, in the US at the time, all going to make the team, and I was really, really stoked. The team ended up being Kelly, Taylor Knotts, Rob Machado, myself, Pete Rocky, and Shane Stoneman were the two juniors. And then it was it was rad. And I'll actually go back, because we had traveled as a team multiple times. We went to Barbados a couple times. So I had sort of been on the US team at that time, a couple iterations, but really Japan was the culmination of like the real big event that we were going to go to. And it was probably, I want to say, Kelly's last real big amateur event. And so we were all sort of on the cusp of becoming professional surfers at the time. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Japan, and it was just Japan. It was fun. And, when I kind of, like that group of people, we're still like, we talk every day. So it's like, I think if you were to ask Rob or, Kelly, Taylor, we'd all sort of laugh and say, maybe that was the best trip of our life. Like, it was just goofy and fun. And we were, Rob's dad was our coach, Jim Machado. Oh, really? Yeah, we used to, we just had so much fun. It was just, again, thinking about, there was nothing else in front of us except for just the day to day, which was actually a really freeing thing now that we're older and we constantly are thinking big picture all day. It was like, can I eat that weird food? How many times am I going to surf? Did I put my sunscreen on? Those are the biggest questions of the day. There's no, that was pretty much it.
And were you filming back then as well? Was that when, like, had you met Taylor by then, and you were kind of like Momentum 1 came out, right? Was that like maybe the year after, or?
It was, so a lot of the momentum stuff, that was like the super early days, right? I want to say momentum kind of happened, and I'd have to fact check, but started to happen just a little bit later. So Kelly wasn't even on tour in 90. 91 was just the beginning. I think 92 or 93 was probably the first momentum. And Taylor really, it was based a lot around Hawaii. And it was, based around California as well. And not until sort of later years did Taylor actually go on tour and do trips to Africa or France, which were basically like gluttonous for getting performance clips. And it was like, those are the places that he would sort of post up, but it was based around either like, WQS or CT stops. And, but that's kind of when that started to kind of take off as well. And I think it was, it's interesting, like it was the same, and Taylor can answer this better than I would, but the same, the genesis for me kind of like comparing Kelly and with Potts, was kind of like, hey, we were watching these beautiful surf movies with great waves every day, but that wasn't our existence. And so Taylor's was just born out of like, hey, I want to see people surf the crappy waves that I surf every day, right? That's like, if you think about momentum, it wasn't about good waves. Like it was Hawaii, which was wipeouts and crazy stuff, but it was, great surfers doing things in not very good waves, which was a totally different recipe than the sort of, aha, beautiful, I scored perfect waves.
And it was tied in with the music as well, right? So that sort of Southern Californian punk rock scene with Pennywise and when all that sort of like was the beginning as well. And yeah, I think that kind of added to the whole raw element of it. Yeah, which is awesome. And so then with the tour, like in 91 when you went on, how was that? I mean, like qualifying and like that must have felt amazing. So like coming off the back of Japan and then going there.
Yeah. So what actually happened is, so in 1991, I was doing the the Bud tour, and the OP Pro came to town, and I surfed through the trials, I believe, and this is when 91 was the first year that they were creating the top 44. So basically, at the year end, you needed to be in the top 44, and it wasn't a goal of mine when I started the year. I wasn't doing events. I wasn't flying to Australia to do all that stuff, but I was going to do the ones in town, and that was the OP Pro. And I got through the trials, I was so stoked, made the main event, started making my way through the main event, ended up coming up against Damian Hardman, who was, he won the world title that year. And I beat him. And I was like, like so stoked. I mean, yeah. And it was just this surreal experience because I was driving. Huntington's about 40 minutes from my house. And so I was driving home every day back and forth. And I don't really think I slept that whole week. I was so like pumped. And then I surfed against Tom Carroll in the next heat, who I had surfed with since I was probably 13. Greg Arnett, who created Arnett sunglasses, he was a neighbor. He lived just down the street, and Tom used to stay with him. And so I've known Tom since, basically when I was standing up on a wave for my first time. And so I had a heat with Tom in Huntington, and I got through somehow. And so I ended up getting into the quarterfinal, and I lost to Brad Gerlach. But it created this next sort of set of like, if you kind of put these stumbling blocks, I like crashed through it. And I said, okay, I can do this Bud Tour thing, but even these really great surfers, I can actually compete against these guys.
Yeah.
So I went after that, we went to France. Ross and I and Kelly went to do those events in France. I didn't have as great a luck in that leg, but it really was like eye-opening, like this is what I want to do. And so I decided in 1992 was going to be like, I'm going all in. I'm going to try to make this thing happen. And I had spent a day at the consulate in Los Angeles because I was going to the Australian consulate to get my visa. And back in the day, you didn't just get these electronic visas. You actually had to physically stay there for a day to get entry to a country. And when I got home, I had a message on my answering machine from Bruce Brown. And so that was the beginning of the Endless Summer 2. And so my idea of competing and chasing the world tour came to a halt because I sort of got this phone call from, like.
Did you believe it was him, or you were like, "Is this someone's messing around with me"?
Totally, dude. My friends used to screw around with me all the time, and I was so gullible. But also, like, I thought Kelly was going to take the job. Like, there were rumors that this project was happening. And I just had thought for sure, Kelly's the best surfer in of our generation. He's a perfect fit for this. And I think what happened, a couple of things is, one, he was well on his way. He had already qualified. I think he ended up 44th in 91. And so 92 is a first year he was going to go after a world title. He couldn't sort of split the time. And I think they didn't really want that. They wanted someone that was going to be like, make a phone call, you pick up and you go. And so, to that effect, I called Bruce back and he said, "Hey, so I'd love to meet you." And I kind of laughed. I'm like, "Okay, great. Like, I'm driving up that way in another 10 days. And he goes, "Well, I'd like to meet you sooner," because he was up in Santa Barbara by Hollister Ranch. And I had just spent the day in LA. The last thing I wanted to do is jump in a car the next day. And he's like, "Could you meet me tomorrow?" And I was like, inside, I'm like, "Of course I can, but do I really want to drive through Los Angeles again?" And so sure enough, the next day, that night, I just jumped back in the car and drove to LA to get a head start and met with Bruce the whole next day in Santa Barbara. And it was really cool. So Bruce Brown is from Dana Point, which is where I live today. And so we knew all the same people. We knew the same places. So the conversation was super easy. And Bruce is just like, it was like fairy tale, like, his voice. I mean, that's how I was introduced to surfing. So, yeah.
So when you decided that you were going to do that, I mean, how did you make the call? Because it was sort of, it was a bit of a crosswords, right? You sort of,
yeah.
Are you going to go on tour, or are you going to go and be part of the end of summer?
It was the easiest decision for sure to make. I knew that this was like a once in a lifetime. And so, the only thing that was hard is that I just you sort of felt like the train was leaving the station with a lot of my friends doing the tour. But I was like, this is just the coolest opportunity. And I mean, and again, like, I guess it's kind of goes back, like, there's these crossroads and sort of things in your life, and you make the decisions because you're just like so head down in them. And it wasn't the easiest thing in the world. I mean, Bruce, I mean, I guess also coming from Chicago, I looked at The Endless Summer. It was like the one movie that every person in the world knew. And so I was like, wait, I'm getting asked to do the second one? Yeah, obvious, right? Like, there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to do that. So it took about 1 second.
Did you know which locations were going to be on it? Were you like, okay, we're going to be going here, and everywhere, or was it all like, a bit of a surprise?
It was a bit of a surprise. The first trip was to Costa Rica, and I think that was a bit of like a real trip, but also a test. Kind of like, hey, how does this work? Do we need more people? Do we need less people? But it really opened, I think, Bruce and everyone's eyes to what it was going to take to get this thing going, right? And so, there were some trips like, we went to Mexico, that didn't make the film. Everywhere needed to have like, it obviously just wasn't about the surfing. It was about some of the cultural things. I mean, we did bullfighting, we were dancing in Costa Rica. Like, it was about sort of the everything else. And then you sort of wrap in surfing.
Yeah. And were you like with the traveling part of it and filming and kind of going back to Taylor Steele? Was that when like were you competing when you started doing Drive Thru?
I had just finished, so I started doing Drive Thru when I had left the tour, maybe about like 2 years after, and so yeah, I mean, I had started working for Hurley, and Bob Hurley has always been a good friend. And when I was at the tail end of my pro tour time, I ended up going to ride for Hurley. And, I think 2004 was my final year that I was on the tour. And I kind of knew like halfway through the year that I was just a little bit of like, you get into those stages of your life where you're like kind of, what does it all mean? What am I doing? I was 35 and I was kind of like, do I want to still be kind of doing this sort of this thing? And I'm like, there has to be something else. And so I started talking to Bob about leaving the tour and coming to work for the brand. And so that's kind of how I transitioned into working with Bob at Hurley. At the same time is when Drive Thru was starting to take shape, and when Taylor and those guys, it was funny. It was great for me because I was like I was just a worker. I was in the office with everyone, and it was my 2-week vacation. So I just had better photos and videos than most on my 2-week vacation. And I didn't need to show them photos of my iPhone. I actually went, oh yeah, here's a TV show. I actually did this from my vacation.
That's sick.
Yeah.
And when you then left the tour and then started at Hurley, what was the main, like, was there a role that was already set out, or like what did you want to do when you started?
Yeah, I think there was 2 sort of goals, I guess. One, I was working with the surfers, the athletes, and also just kind of helping with any brand activities, right? Just the Hurley brand was still pretty new. And so I had a lot of experience from being on the road. Sorry about that noise. I had a lot of experience from being on the road and being around the different regions. So, my first instinct to Bob was like, hey, give me, Hurley Europe and I'll go there and run it for you. Which is just a ridiculous comment. Especially just now I know what it takes to run the business. But yeah, that was my initial thought was like, hey, give me a region, I'll go run it for you, which would have been disaster.
And how is it like working on the events? Because Hurley was that when they started then sponsoring Lowers and then the US Open, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that was kind of that was sort of how that was me kind of working on the brand and like where we were positioned. And at the time we had created a board short, the Phantom board short, and it was like, okay, here's something that is somewhat revolutionary, something new and very performance-driven product. And it was like, okay, well, we should sort of match that across the way. And and so that's when we did. It was a conversation. It used to be the Boost Mobile event at Russell's, and so a good friend of mine, Mark Fuel, was running Boost Mobile here in California, and so we actually just it was, in marketing, it was like, hey, we had a pitch meeting, and I had a couple ideas, and I went to coffee with Mark, and I wanted to give him my ideas, and I wanted to see him react. And he's like, well, why don't you guys come on to the Boost Mobile? And all my ideas went out the window. And I was like, that's a way better idea. And so that was the beginning of us sort of doing trestles. It was like, I went back and pitched it, and there was a couple sideways glances, but I think 2 days later, we were presenting sponsors to the first year of the Boost Mobile event presented by Hurley, and then after that, we ended up taking the license.
And then, so you were then, I guess, starting as team manager, and then that turned into, well, like running sports marketing. Is that right?
Yep. Same, and it was sort of the same. I guess ultimately the same role, just more involved in brand. Like, and I think the focus from at the time with Bob, we started really thinking about the performance and actually athletes, and Nike was involved at the time, but I'm really appreciative for everything. Bob and everyone. Obviously, we're not there anymore. Nike sold the business a year ago, 2 years ago now, and so it's an entirely different group that's running it. And so it's really interesting to sort of and kind of the core group of people who were at Hurley at the time have sort of left, and now we're sort of doing our own thing, based a lot around this idea of kind of the best things we learned, and wanting to do something that feels like us. I think one of the things that we've that you notice in our world is that it's really hard to remain true when to your passion. When these businesses just get so built up, and you need to deliver so many products to so many different people to deliver actually something of substance to a consumer that's not just a crappy T-shirt or a board short that's kind of an afterthought, like an actual product that and so so that's kind of the move away from the old business and into a new one.
Into the new, and you've taken on the role. You're the president, right? So the head honcho.
Yeah.
For Florence Marine X. And was it John John's? Was it his sort of, I guess the vision from the start, and then it was almost like bringing the band back together, right? And sort of like getting you guys involved. And
yeah, I think look, John's in such a unique position because he really can decide. Like, I mean, he could have gone and surfed for any brand. I mean, any brand would have paid him a lot of money, and he could have done that, right? And that's sort of the traditional path. Anybody who knows John, he is a old soul and a young, like, he's wise beyond his years, and he's not necessarily interested in just sort of following what other people have done. And I think he looked at this as an opportunity to go, hey, can I make a brand that actually solves things that I do every day? Like the products that I need every day. I mean, you think about it, just flip the script. If you have the opportunity to create a brand and go, hey, what do I wear every day? What do I need to make my life better? Can I make a brand out of that? And it's like, for most of us, I know me personally, I don't live an interesting, my life isn't that interesting. But for John, it is.
He's in the water every day, right? Whether it's not necessarily just surfing, it's kind of, whether he's on a boat or whatever.
Yeah, he wakes up and every day it's like, it's the playground, it's Disneyland in front of his house. It's either he's paddling, he's doing something, he's sailing, he's surfing. And he truly is that sort of like, hey, I'm going to wake up and let the conditions sort of point me in the direction of how I'm going to have fun in the ocean today. I've seen it firsthand, and it's pretty inspiring, so I think that's the genesis of it. And it's like this idea of, getting out there every day and sort of getting off your butt. And we all see it. You wake up in the morning, if you have a surf before you go to work, or if you go for a swim, or you go for a walk on the beach or something, just getting out and exercising makes you feel a million times better. And the idea around, sort of John is like, hey, get out there and explore, like go out there and see things. Don't, especially in the Zoom world that we've lived in, I think the message is more clear than ever. And I think there's going to be a huge return to that, as we'll see as everything kind of turns, post-pandemic, into people having true experiences and not sort of just, they're going to want to go out there and be in the water. They're going to want to go out there and go on hikes. So yeah, that's the brand.
And was there, like, when you were growing up, was there quite a lot of industry there? So within, like, say, for example, media, and I know that you had a relationship with Flame, and I was just wondering, how that relationship was, back then.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, right when you said that, I was thinking of Larry. So yeah, this area, things have changed for sure. The industry has changed, but a lot of, people who work in the surf industry, or, a lot of really cool companies have been born out of this area. And so, that connectivity is still really, really high. I mean, it's actually really fun. Also, there's a lot of great surfers here: Kolohe and Dino, Caroline Marks, Griffin Colapinto, Felipe Toledo. I could go on for days. I could list for days, but on any given day, all those people are out surfing. Jordy Smith was out surfing just before Gabriel Medina came by, Italo. Like, it's sort of like Timmy Patterson, Mayhem Surfboards, Matt Biolis. All those guys are shaping surfboards just down the street. So everybody sort of comes through this area. And it's, if you're in the this industry, it's a great place to kind of rub shoulders and have real conversations in the water or whatever, and not like forced. And that's kind of one of the beauties of this area, is like, yeah, it's just real interaction, just people surfing, and it's not, I always find, like, those chance encounters where, you're in the water, it creates that bond to where, yeah, you get to know people a lot better. If someone's a prick in the water, it's like,
maybe I don't want to do
even
business
if you're
with
nice
this
to
guy.
me on land, yeah, I know more about you. Yeah.
That's funny. And where do you see it all going? Like the industry, I mean, obviously, like being involved with it for your whole career. I mean, where do you kind of,
Yeah,
what do you think is going to happen?
I think the industry is going to be fine. I think we're going to get to a place where, some of the, I think it may get a little bit more focused on this experience, as I was saying. People are still surfing for the right reasons. There's more people surfing than ever. I think mostly surfers we're more open to the idea of more people being in the water. I think that's just the way it is. I think people have accepted it and said, hey, that's cool, great. I think that's that. I don't know what happens to the actual businesses. I think that's to be seen. I'd like to see I'd like to see more salt water in some of those businesses, only just because I think the more it becomes people who don't have sort of that in their kind of DNA, it can, and I'm not saying, I think it's great to have different perspectives, but when those perspectives are actually pushing so hard their ideas, it does stray away. And I've seen it with most businesses. It's important to have at least the consumer or fan, like whoever it is, at the heart of every decision. And so I think that will be interesting to see as it evolves. But I think the industry's fine. I think that there's more good surfers than there's ever been. Olympics could be very interesting. Really excited about that overall. I think the waves might be average, but I think the experience and what the surfers are getting to participate in is going to be fantastic. And the fact that surfing is into 2024 and looks very likely for 2028 in Los Angeles as well. It's a pretty good runway for surfing for the next 10 years.
And they'll definitely put on a show. I mean, sort of taking, the small waves that we just had in Narrabeen and Newcastle, and then they make it look unreal. So.
I was just going to say, and it would be enough to get people excited. What the broadcasters will do as well. They'll tell these great athlete stories. They'll use great imagery and other stuff. So it won't be just staring at 2-foot beach break. They're gonna, they'll explain the beauty around the people, and I think it'll make surfing look great.
Nice. And Pat, so what's the next sort of focus for you, and what are you going to be working on with Florence, with the brand?
Yeah, I mean, just the day-to-day, we are going to open the doors to start the business soon. We're plotting some really fun things with John. John, as I said, has big ideas. So, working on those products and solutions to sort of his day-to-day needs, and so it's really fun. I'm actually today, as part of our sort of getting out there and learning, I'm taking my first sailing lesson today, which should be fun. I've wanted to do it for like 10 years and I've just never done it. And so today's the day. Today is the beginning of a new chapter.
Where are you going to be going?
Just around Dana Point Harbor. We've got 5 sessions set up over the next 10 days. And so hopefully by the 5th session, I'll be able to function as and not tip us over. So yeah, we'll see. But I think that's it. Just exciting. Hopefully, get back on the road a little bit, start traveling. Would love to get to Europe. Would love to get to Lisbon and Portugal. Hopefully that is in the cards in the coming year.
Nice. Well, yeah. Whenever you do, definitely let us know, and yeah, we can hook up for a wave.
Yeah, we'll come up. We'll get away for sure.
Nice. And what's the best way if people want to follow what you guys are up to?
Yeah,
how
just
can they do that?
Yeah, go to. Instagram is Florence Marine X, and that's also our website. Just do a search, you'll find us. One thing to mention is we launched the brand. One of the things that we're doing that's going to be really unique is we're creating a membership that a lot of brands are doing. Our membership is going to be quite cool. You're going to earn rewards for buying product, but also the cool thing is we're actually going to create a bit of a community with John. And so, as we launch this brand, John is going to be basically sending clips as he goes, new things that he's working on, stuff like that. So people that want to sort of be on the inside and actually learn and see stuff that John's doing, they're going to be able to get access to things that nobody else is ever going to see, which is pretty rad. And so we're really kind of doubling down on the idea of that sort of one-to-one relationship and creating this sort of community. So when you do come, when we open the doors, come and check us out, sign up for the membership. The membership is going to be unreal. The product is great. And just know that the idea of kind of creating that community of people getting out there and doing stuff is kind of where we're at.
Right. Nice. Well, Pat, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome speaking to you, and
Thank you.
going through all the stories, and we'll definitely keep an eye out with what you guys are working on, and hopefully see you over here in Europe when we can.